Welcome to 2024 Championship Weekend here in Harriman, Utah. We are at Zions Bank Stadium, the site of two semifinals tonight and the 2024 championship game Saturday night under the lights. Thank you so much for joining us here on Game Day Live, presented by Power Up. Ian Toner, thrilled to be joined by Colorado Summit's Alex Atkins, Philadelphia Phoenix's James Pollard, Salt Lake Shreds, Bryce Merrill, and the one and only voice of Ultimate, Evan Lepler. Welcome into Zions Bank Stadium, everyone. We've been getting acclimated. We've been watching teams warm up here, and earlier today, guys, we got two great matchups ahead of us tonight. Before we dive into the nitty-gritty, I'd love to hear about the major storyline or the major expectation that each of you have coming into this weekend.
Yeah, I'm interested to see if anyone can beat DC. I think they're a heavy favorite coming into this weekend, and I want to see if anyone's going to be able to take them down.
James?
Wind, field position. It's gust up to 40 miles an hour tonight, so field position is going to be key for these teams.
And for those of you at home who haven't caught the presser or any of the other social media posts, we've been having aggressive gusts all day long. It's been something that the teams have been trying to adapt to in their warm-up sessions. Bryce, what do you got looking ahead to this weekend?
You know, it's the same weekend. It's a new cast of characters. You go back to the beginning of the season where these the four teams we thought would be duking it out, ready for new teams, new storylines, and new heroes to step up to this weekend.
First time the New York Empire aren't here since 2017. Evan, what do you have your eye on?
I really look at the opportunity for the guys that haven't made their name yet. You know, guys like Will Brandt or Spencer Lofink or Tobias Brooks, like the next generation. Obviously, DC's the favorite, but in these conditions, the wind being a great equalizer, there's an opportunity for the narrative to change this weekend and for some of the other young, up-and-rising players to be the story at the end of the night tonight or even tomorrow hoisting the trophy. So that's one of the fascinating things when we start a weekend like this. The favorite wins some of the time, but not all the time. And these conditions, Kins, as you certainly know, it's going to make everything weird.
This is why they play the games, right? You've got your favorites, you've got your underdogs, and we just got to see who can execute in these conditions. Let's take a look at the actual matchups themselves and how these teams got here. Our first game at 7 o'clock Eastern is going to feature the Minnesota Wind Chill, the Central Division champions, facing off against the DC Breeze, the champions out of the East Division, their first appearance here at Championship Weekend. Minnesota's path here to Championship Weekend. They earned a first-round bye by capturing the regular season title in the Central Division, and they had to face off against the Madison Radicals, a team that made it back to the playoffs for the first time since their title back in 2018. That was a team that really built its identity over the course of the season on its defense, and you saw in the Central Division Championship game, Madison's offense just couldn't really hang, and Minnesota was finding a next level in that matchup.
Well, Minnesota was the superior team against Madison, there's no doubt about it. Now you could flip that and say DC is the superior team to Minnesota from national team players, from past championship experience, etc. But obviously these conditions are the equalizer, and Minnesota is used to playing their games at Seafoam Stadium and chatting with the guys. They say there's a Central Division feel to the conditions that we got here today.
Yeah, I think the Central Division guys always feel like there's a Central Division feel at a championship weekend. I can remember that from last year. We were in Minnesota, so I think there was a lot of excitement there. I definitely will be interested to see if the Minnesota defense, you know, that has been so hyped up throughout the year, and we've been talking about it today, if they can slow down the DC Breeze offense.
Kins, you gave the Wind Chill zero chance against the Salt Lake Shred last year and then ate your words a little bit.
No, I don't remember the eating of words. Maybe you do. I
remember it vividly.
And I think I'm doubling down this year. If I want to maintain credibility, I think I'm sticking with DC.
Bryce, did Minnesota surprise you at championship weekend last year with anything they did?
No, such a good team. They're organized. They know exactly what they want. And so, yeah, obviously we were confident that game. It ended up being a game of the smallest of margins. And I think they are like comfortable with that. I think they want to step up. You know what I love from that game against Madison is they won that game with 18 turnovers. And looking at the conditions today, I think it's going to be more of the same. The game plans are not going to go the way they want it to. And Minnesota's shown that they're comfortable with that. They're winners. They're going to find a way. And I think just like they did last year, I think they've got a lot of that in them to figure something out and to make sure that they are deep in this game, deep into the fourth quarter.
That's a good point, Bryce. I think Minnesota will be a lot more comfortable with having more turnovers than DC.
Minnesota held on 11 of 16 0 points in the Central Division Championship. They did finish that game with 18 turnovers, but they also converted 12 of 20 D-line break opportunities. Let's take a look at DC. For so long, New York, the titan of that division, DC was struggling to get over that hump. They couldn't make it to championship weekend. We talked to A.J. Merriman this morning. Of course, he characterized it as nothing other than a hump. When they got over the proverbial hump this year, that was just another game that they had to play against New York and another game that they had to play against Boston. I think their path was really interesting this year in that they had to take down New York earlier in the season, earlier in the road than you might have expected. And then they had to execute against Boston, a team that had acquired Jeff Babbitt and Ben Katz down the line.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about DC is for a team that it's their first time at championship weekend, you wouldn't expect them to be one of the heavy favorites. But having battled against New York and trying to beat one of the best teams in the in the entire league for the past few years, they really have tested themselves against the best, and it should be really prepared for the competition at championship weekend.
Yeah, I mean, that's that East Coast mentality. All the teams in the East Coast have been working to prepare for New York to knock them off, and each year teams have been getting closer and closer, and DC's been doing that. New head coach, some new star players on their O-line, and it just clicked for them this year.
I look at the ascension of Coach Lauren Boyle. She stepped out in that first press conference months ago to retake the control of the DC narrative. And you see that playing out exactly like she said it would. I think that's a confidence. I think that's a sign of a really mature coach and a coaching organization building on what Coach Stanley had established for them. And I think they've been able to take that entire season, those little humps along the way, and not overplay anything to get themselves to be in the pole position here at Champ Weekend.
And the question for the Breeze tonight against Minnesota is, can they play their game? You know, this is a team that I think 10 straight games has had like 12 or 13 turnovers or less. They might have that before the end of the first quarter tonight. It's going to be a kooky game. How will they adjust their mentality offensively? That small ball, inside flick. Like we were all out there throwing before the game. The disc is going to do some wacky things tonight, and Johnny Malks and Andrew Roy and Rowan McDonald and Thomas Edmonds, guys that are used to doing whatever they want with the disc, Jacques Nissen, are going to need to absorb some adversity throughout tonight's game. And they're not the biggest team, right, James? I mean, you know, the Breeze, for as good as they are, they're not a bunch of giants. And that was an issue against New York and Boston at times this year and in the past. If this is a game of hospital passes and hucks, I like Minnesota's chances to keep it close.
Yeah, I do too. Johnny Malks mentioned it in his presser today, talking about field position, which Johnny Malks is one of the best throwers in the league and doesn't turn over the disc. So for him to mention field position and turnovers, just let you know how windy it is out here and that they're already planning for the turnovers.
Yeah, I love the way he summarized it. He talked about finding that sweet spot between field position and possession. And I think that's going to be a key, not only for DC, but for every single team that steps onto the field in these adverse conditions tonight.
Yeah, I mean, the one concern I would have for DC is if they're not able to complete passes. I mean, I think they're heavy favorites, one, because of the talented throwers that they have, and they should, I think, be able to adjust to the wind a little bit better. But if they aren't able to complete passes and it turns into a hucking position game like Evan said, then that could be trouble for them. But I think they'll be able to figure out the wind and complete passes relatively easily because they're just so talented.
I mean, they're not the biggest team, but they're the team that made it out the East, so clearly they can do fine with the deep balls.
Bryce, what would your strategy be offensively in terms of maintaining possession versus hucking and playing D?
You know, I think you've got to be aware of your opponent in Minnesota. they are really capable of capitalizing on opportunistic doubles, junking up those spots. And so I think you're going to want to find that balance of quick field position, quick ball movement, so that you can stay ahead of those double teams while also making sure that you're taking the shots that you want to. Any chance that you get to keep that disc flat and through the middle is such a higher percentage chance of working for you. If they are moving to the sidelines, if they're counting on those blades and those Oyos, they're going to find themselves with some short field turnovers that Minnesota's going to be hunting for.
Do you feel like you're about to get blown off this stage?
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. We'll see what happens here.
Every gust of wind comes has me questioning my pick a little bit more.
So those are the opponents in our first semifinal. Minnesota facing off against the DC Breeze. Let's take a look at the next semifinal. We've got the Carolina Flyers, who emerged out of the South battling the Seattle Cascades, who captured the West Division Championship on this field just 2 weeks ago. Carolina and Atlanta, I mean, you look at the course of the season and the playoffs, I mean, that was a heavyweight slugfest. Those teams trading punches all season long. And then when you got to the playoff game, I feel like Carolina really started to turn the screws on in the second half. Atlanta's offense looked so clean in the first half of that South Division title game, but it was the second half when Carolina really started to come alive.
Well, I'll just say from being there in person, it was devastating for Atlanta, but a different kind of devastating than last year, because they did so much this year to try to take the next step forward after losing in double OT in the South Final a year ago. And they really did. Like, Bobby Lay and Austin Taylor had a great season playing together. Brett Holzmeyer became an MVP candidate. Jeremy Langdon, an O-line dominant threat. But Carolina is not intimidated at all by Atlanta. They never have been. They probably never will be. And Carolina is a team with legitimate championship DNA. I mean, even after Jakeem Polk makes this block, Christian Belis, youngster out of UNC Wilmington, just starting his junior year of college, he makes kind of the game-saving D. And then offensively at the end of the game, the Flyers run out the clock, which I don't think anybody could do today. It'd be foolish to try to do it today in these conditions, but more credit to the Flyers offense. They recognize the moment, and that's what this Flyers team is. They're a championship caliber team.
I'm wondering if you guys think that there's anything different about this Carolina team compared to the iterations of the Flyers that we've seen from seasons past. You know, 2021, they finally got the monkey off their back, won a league championship. 2022, fell short in the semifinals. Is there anything that makes this group particularly unique this year?
You know, I love you can look a lot to the leadership and the coaching staff of Carolina to use the tools they have at the time in that season. And they're not trying to run their 2021 offense in 2024. Instead, DeNardis and that leadership group is able to recognize what their advantages are, and they're able to put that in the game. They're not going to run a 5-minute point killer here, but I guarantee they're going to find the advantages in this wind with the time management or the field space management, and they're going to turn the screws. That, again, it's not going to look like what it looked like against Atlanta, but I guarantee that that pressure and that adaptation throughout the game is going to be on full display tonight.
I think they're a stronger team throughout the lineup. Mike DeNardis said it great in the presser that you don't know who's going to have a great game. It could be anyone. Like Toby Brooks in their last game didn't really have the scores, but was clearing space for his teammates, and everyone else was getting open. So I think they're just deeper in using everyone on the lineup versus just the top like 5 or 6.
Yeah, I think that depth can be critical. The question is how much of that depth will see the field when you've got really adverse wind conditions, at least that we expect at this moment, Evan.
And I talked about their championship DNA. This is a different team than 3 years ago. You know, Noah Saul is gone, David Richardson, Tim McAllister, some of the veterans, Justin Allen, that kind of built upward from 2015 when they joined the league. So they're a younger team, but they're also explosive. You know, I mentioned Belis defensively, Cooper Williams, Matt Tucker. Like, they got a lot of guys that aren't household names yet, but might be by the end of the weekend.
Be excited to see what Carolina can put together tonight. Now let's turn our attention to Seattle. This is a team that finished under 500 in the West Division for several preceding seasons, and they come out of nowhere with a 9-3 regular season. And they come into Salt Lake after defending their home turf, the first home playoff game they ever hosted, and taking out the Oakland Spiders. They surprised the Salt Lake Shred here in front of the Shredheads. And this is a team that feels like it's really finding its form, and I hate to sound cliche, but almost peaking at the right time relative to where they were at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, I mean, Seattle's been one of those teams that's been grinding, trying to get better and better. I think one of the big keys this year for them was consistency in the roster game to game. Because that's always a struggle. If you can't have the same 20 players or even same 15 every game, you're constantly playing differently. Even one person out of the lineup changes the way you have to play. So they've been very consistent this year.
And talking to Jesse Bolton and Khalif El-Salam and Garrett Martin, the foundation for that was laid in the offseason, right? They had to do all of the recruiting of the top talent in the Seattle community. They had to get everyone bought into the workout structure and the practice structure. And you see the fruit that has borne over the course of this season. It just makes you wonder, what could this community have produced if there was that level of buy-in 2 years ago?
And in the huddle after they beat Salt Lake a couple weeks ago, Garrett Martin talked about the foundations being laid last year. I mean, he said we were 4-8 last year, but we were a damn good team. We lost a bunch of close games. We were building the seeds of success. They obviously did that this year. And Kins, I'm interested. You faced Seattle early in the year and then late in the year. I mean, when did you start taking the Seattle team seriously?
It's a good question. That's a good question. I think
take the question seriously.
I'm taking the question.
It's a trap question.
I take every opponent seriously. I think, yeah, it was a drastically different team by the end of the year. Coming into the first game, to be honest, it's like, all right, we're playing Seattle. Should be a nice way to start the season. And yeah, we won that game pretty comfortably. We played them one of our last games of the season at their home stadium, and yeah, they played really well. I think, like James was talking about, their consistency with the roster was probably the biggest thing, and the addition of Ambrose to just make plays. They had a lot more energy consistently throughout the games than they did in years prior.
Yeah, I love the story of a team getting buy-in and all of that, and I think that's absolutely true, but we're missing that they added Lucas Ambrose. They added 31 blocks this season, and I think everything that Garmar said about that community and the depths of Seattle is real, but they bring in an elite playmaker who's able to go off in the final couple games of those seasons. I know he put 4 and 2 blocks on us in those 2 games, and absolutely taking up entire acreage on the field where we don't want to throw and we don't want to go. It's difficult to talk about Seattle and their ascension without mentioning the game-changing defensive impact of a player like Lucas Ambrose.
Bryce, I know you're meticulous with your film. What comes to mind as you re-watch the final couple minutes here?
That's a rude question, Evan.
Oh my goodness.
No, again, I think it speaks to what Seattle was able to do, to give up 3 points late in the fourth quarter, to then absolutely bounce back and make it feel like they were never out of control of the game. I know a younger Seattle team, when we rattled off 3 deep in the fourth, would have just been content to have been close, been content to make it a great game. Instead, they go and they make 2 really veteran holds against us in the crosswind, using 3 yards on the trap sideline, and it's absolutely steely. You see Garmar and Lofink and some of those players all over it, and that shows you the growth from those early season games to where they're at now heading into championship weekend.
Well, credit to Kelly Johnson, Casey Ikeda, and Jesse Bolton for getting that group to be bought into the season and bought into the game plan with the season on the line. We're just getting started here on Game Day Live, brought to you by Power Up. When we come back, we're going to bring in the league's all-time leading goal scorer. Cam Brock will join us to talk about this weekend's matchups, potentially some MVP chatter, and other things he hasn't been able to squeeze into a toss-up podcast just yet. Stay with us right here on WatchUFA.tv and WatchUFA YouTube. More pregame action coming your way.
They hate when you elevate. The second of losses, I'm handing them out, yeah, I had to go delegate. It feel like I'm floating, I'm lost in the moment, I swear I could levitate. They never believed that I would really fly, I had to go demonstrate. I had to set them straight. They hate when you elevate.
Throw like a pro with a new Pro Ultimate Frisbee. Created with input from the sport's premier passers, the Pro Frisbee is specially designed to fly through the wind and maintain its edge. Experience the official Frisbee of the UFA and get yours at shopufa.com today.
Hello, Premium Trail Mix. Power Up is a snack that is uncomplicated and uncompromising. Every ingredient is thoughtfully sourced and carefully crafted for a mix that elevates your snacking experience. There's no better way to power up your day.
My first few years of college, I threw every single day. Of course you want to be a champion. Of course you want to be working towards winning titles.
Be happy, but never satisfied.
Better than ever.
Minutes away from opening pull here at Championship Weekend. Thanks for joining us here on Game Day Live, brought to you by Power Up. Ian Toner alongside Evan Lepler. And for this segment and this segment only, the league's all-time leading goal scorer and
Matt Smith.
swing pass analyst,
Adam
Brock.
Ruffner.
Yeah. Daniel Cohen. Oh, wait.
We've got a wonderful cast of characters here behind the camera. But Cam, thank you so much for making time for us. Pleasure to see you.
Yeah.
You've had some time to get acclimated here in Utah. What are the biggest storylines in your mind coming into this championship weekend?
I mean, honestly, a lot of it, I think, comes down to the weather. I mean, we can't ignore the wind. That is certainly going to play a factor in these games. And, you know, talking to some of the players when they came around for shoot-around earlier and some of the – it really seems like, for the most part, players have a great mindset of, like, you know, they just know that there's going to be an increase and maybe some turnovers. You're just going to have to roll with it. I did worry. I mean, I'm going to say it seemed like the Carolina players maybe were the only ones that were kind of like, oh, this wind. And it kind of has me wondering, like, are they going to come and maybe not face that adversity as well as the other teams?
Interesting. Also, I love that you refer to warm-up as shoot-around. We got to start doing that a little more frequently because everyone's got to practice taking shots.
Yeah. Basketball guy at heart.
I am a basketball guy at heart.
In this win.
Sure.
Okay, we're going to talk about both matchups, maybe some MVP conversation if we've got time, but based on an off-camera conversation that we had, I want to start with the Carolina-Seattle matchup.
Sure.
And I want you to take us through your logic of who you think is the favorite in that matchup and why.
Sure. Favorite is maybe not the word I would use because I think everyone has the same favorite. It's Carolina. Like, they've been here before. They have guys that have won a UFA title before. So, of course, like, most people's minds, they're the favorite. And I totally get that line of thinking. They beat a really good Atlanta team to get here. But look, I've been riding the Seattle train for a couple months now, and I'm the conductor, I think, at this point. Like, I am the one who is just on this hype train, and I think, especially given the win, one thing that they have excelled at all year is defensive playmaking, and I know there's some questions about maybe what that looks like in the West Division compared to the South Division or compared to the East Division, but I think just the amount of guys that they have that can play make on defense, given the fact that it's windy and throws are probably going to be a little less accurate than normal, and I think the freedom kind of with which they play when they make mistakes, there's never the hanging of heads, there's never the like frustration that I see come out in some other teams, and I think that's really going to bode well for them in a game that we know is going to be a little sloppy probably.
Well, listening to Khalif El-Salam in the morning press conferences, he said, my message to the team all playoffs long has been, we're playing with house money. And so I think that kind of brings the looseness and the freedom. Evan, you feel...
Khalif also said that, you know, we're not just here to play, we're here to win. So you can see we're here with house money, but this is an opportunity for them, and it's not an opportunity they might get again. You know, the West Division is going to get better next year, not worse. And while the Seattle team is rising, you know, they've got some veterans who are near the end of their career. They've got a guy in Aaron Wolf who's probably not going to be around next year, going back to Germany. So I don't know about I mean, that's contradictory to what he said about we're here playing to win, playing with house money. I think it's clear that Carolina's the favorite in this game. I love your optimism about Seattle, Cam, and I think they're a really fun team. I just worry about, do they have the DNA to grind with Carolina for 4 quarters? A Carolina team that's been to championship weekend, you know, this is the 3rd time in the last 4 years. A team that took down New York and DC in playoff games in the past, and Atlanta this year. Man, my hair looks great, doesn't it? This is a Carolina team that I really think, you know, had a bumpy road during the middle of the season when they lost at DC big, and then they lost also twice against Atlanta. But I don't think that is who this Carolina team is. I think this Carolina team is this squad that dominated Atlanta their first 2 games of the year, that took care of business the first half of the season, and I think they're going to show it tonight.
Let's turn our attention to the warm-up that's going on behind us right now. Minnesota just bringing it in after a couple throws in the wind. They're facing off against the DC Breeze. Cam, what's your view on this one?
Man, I think this is going to be one of those games. It's really going to be low scoring. I think even in a non-windy game, just like the pace with which DC has played all season, it's a slower pace. They're very deliberate in everything that they do. Add in the factor of the wind. I think we're looking at a low-scoring game where neither team's really going to be able to create too much separation. And I think Will Brandt kind of hit it on the head this morning when he was talking about maybe some of the keys for tonight, which is it might just come down to who has the more short field turnovers. The team that can avoid those like turnovers within, you know, the shadow of your own defensive end zone, the team that does better in that area is probably the team that's going to come out on top. And I think we're looking at 2 teams that can really muck things up in the handler space and really make it difficult to get your offense started and initiated. So I think we're going to see quite a few turns before teams even make it to half field, and it's really going to come down to which defensive line can capitalize on those short fields.
You've played Minnesota so many times.
Yes.
You've never played DC, but you've watched them a lot.
Yes.
If there was no wind, would you give Minnesota a 1% chance to win this game? And how does the wind change things and make Minnesota more competitive, do you think?
Sure. So honestly, if this was like they were playing in Indy, they were playing in Grand Park in the Dome, I would still give Minnesota a fighting chance. Like, I know DC is the team who clearly, I think over the last month of the season, has looked like the best team in the league. And I don't think there's really any debate in that. However, we're looking at a Minnesota team that has only had kind of their full roster available for their last 2 games. And, you know, it wasn't against the level of competition that some of the other teams had to play through, but they dominated in both of those games. And when you're facing lesser competition, all you can ask is to show that you are completely the better team and convincingly the better team. And you can't ask more than that. I mean, they can't force a division, you know, go play a game against Boston, go play a game against New York or whoever else. So the fact that they took care of business, I think they have a better chance than most people are really giving them, even in a neutral field. And with this wind, they use the wind better than anyone defensively, and they've been doing it at Seafoam all the time. So,
final thing I want to ask, perhaps just Cam, Evan, if you want to. Talk to me about your MVP frontrunner if you're going to be submitting your ballot before this weekend starts. I think everyone's got Jeff Babbitt top of their mind, Lucas Ambrose, Brett Holzmeier, but where's your mind leaning right now?
To me, it's really like a 2-person race, and it feels weird because I don't think since Dylan Tunnell won the MVP back in, I want to say like 2017, maybe 2016, have we had a guy who might win MVP who's not at championship weekend.
Sure.
And that is a little unique. It's been the Empire show as of late, right?
Yeah.
I think I lean Jeff Babbitt. I mean, he had a fantastic individual season, but also you could see he completely changed the culture in Boston. They went from a team who was scrappy and like found themselves in the playoffs last year, almost on accident it felt like, to a team that like nearly was the top seed in that division. And I think that can't be it can't be overstated enough. Like, that dude completely changed the entire franchise, was still the guy, even without the supporting cast of the rest of the Empire. And you saw what the Empire looked like down a Jeff Babbitt. Like, it was a completely different vibe over there than it's been the last few years, and he's just that guy. I mean, it's him.
I think going into championship weekend, it's a 2-horse race, Jeff Babbitt versus Brett Holzmeier. But I think there are some players here that can play themselves into the picture. Lucas Ambrose is probably number 1.
Yeah.
If he can lead Seattle to the finals and have a big game doing it,
Yep.
that would help his cause. Johnny Malks, Thomas Edmonds, a couple guys on DC. Maybe you throw A.J. Merriman, Cole Jurek in there too, perhaps. You know, but yeah, I'm really torn right now between Holzmeier and Babbitt. If I had to pick one of those two, you know, they both went to the same round of the playoffs. They had, you know, different seasons, but dominant seasons in their own way. So yeah, I think it's really close. And just to, not to correct you, but John in the Nethercut, Rowan McDonald also made MVP without going to championship weekend.
Oh, you are right, and that was after that. I forgot. Yeah, how quickly we.
So
forget.
there is history there.
Yeah.
To say, you know, there was a several-year stretch before the New York domination took over our lives.
Well, there are plenty of other players who are going to be taking the field and hopefully having a big impact outside of the MVP candidates that we've discussed and alluded to. We're going to take a look at some of those players to watch in each of our key matchups coming up. Stay with us right here on Watch UFA TV's YouTube and watchufa.tv. Game Day Live, brought to you by Power Up, rolls on.
On the grand stage to keep possession alive. Huge bid, gets the target.
Opportunity for the Germans, and they break with ease.
Throw it the full 80 yards to the field? Are you kidding me? And an incredible catch. You are kidding me.
Oh my God!
One of the plays of the year.
They never believed that I would really fly. I had to go demonstrate. I had to set them straight. They hate when you elevate.
Throw like a pro with a new Pro Ultimate Frisbee. Created with input from the sport's premier passers, the Pro Frisbee is specially designed to fly through the wind and maintain its edge. Experience the official Frisbee of the UFA and get yours at shopufa.com today.
Welcome back to Zions Bank Stadium. Just under 30 minutes away from opening pull here at Championship Weekend. We also want to welcome back Alex Atkins, James Pollard, and Bryce Merrill. Evan, you just moved a few seats down. Ian Toner, happy to be with you. And we're going to start taking a look at some of the key players in our first semifinal. Let's start with the Minnesota wind chill. Plenty of players that we could be pointing out. I think the first one we want to start talking about is Will Brandt.
Well, Will's going to have the disc in his hands a lot tonight, and that's been the case all year. Minnesota needs him to take chances in order to be successful. And we saw on the big stage against the Shred last year, he had the guts to take a deep shot with about 2 minutes left in the game tied to put his team on top. And he has shown a real chutzpah from a young player that you need. Now, the question is, you know, how much help is he going to get around him? How healthy is he? And does he have what it takes to go against Jasper Tom, David Bloodgood, A.J. Merriman, Thomas Edmonds, and the rest of the DC Breeze defense? Because that is going to be different than any defense he's faced all year long.
Yeah, after his growth over the course of this season and his performance in the semifinals last year, it's hard to believe that the lights are going to be too bright for him or the moment's going to be too big for him. Another big thrower that we've all been talking about that we want to keep our eye on for Minnesota, especially in this wind, Josh Klain.
Yeah, I think Josh Klain, a similar role, different stature and different type of player in some ways, but a similar role to Will. He's going to touch the disc a lot. He has a lot of different release points. He's one of the guys that shoots the most for the wind chill. And I think it's just, you know, there's going to be a lot of pressure on these throwers to make the right decisions. If it's windy, you've got to play for the position. If it's not as windy, you've got to be opportunistic and, you know, punch the disc in when you have the chance and the wind is down.
And if we shift our focus downfield, one of Will Brandt's partners in crime all season long, both in pro and in college, has been Gordon Larson.
You know, and Gordon Larson, I apologize. I was not familiar with your game before that New York showing, especially that first half. Since then, though, it feels like he's been on a heater. He's doing so many good things downfield, and he's dominating the middle of the field. I think on a windy night like tonight, we've got big throwers, and we know that Minnesota has big targets if they're able to establish that vertical game. But it's going to be on Gordon Larson to really own the middle of the field and make sure that we have some nice 5, 10, 15-yard gainers, open and break side, and that his throwing continuation is going to be able to continue to produce the assists like he has in the second half of the season.
The other thing we haven't mentioned tonight, we've talked so much about the throwing in the wind. Catching in the wind is so much more difficult, and guys like Larson downfield, you know, this game could be decided by a couple late drops.
A couple late drops, a couple who's going to read the disc better in the wind. I mean, that's a really challenging and underrated part of the game.
We've talked a lot about Minnesota's offense. As we take a look at their defense, I think we've all been talking off camera about the difference between the downfield dynamics that DC has and Minnesota has, and you compare the size of those downfield cutting cores, the downfield defending cores. A key piece of Minnesota's defense is Dylan DeClercq.
Oh yeah, Dylan DeClercq, super athletic, looking to make big plays. Look out for him on the turn. Once they get the turn, look for him to have the disc, look to score. If he's getting 3-4 goals tonight, Minnesota's going to run away with it. 3
assists in the Central Division Championship game, and you know he's going to bring the energy. Another member of that Team USA contingent that's going to be competing at the World Ultimate Championships in Australia after championship weekend here. Let's turn our eyes to DC now. Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth, Evan. Let's turn our attention to DC. I think this team does a better job than most distributing the ball offensively. It's hard to isolate 1 or 2 guys that you can just shut down and then slow their entire offense down. And their quarterback, their guy leading the charge, is Johnny Malks.
Yeah, and the reason I picked Johnny as one of the players to watch is they have a lot of really good throwers, Andrew Roy, Gus Norbaum, but Johnny is also able to get down the field and maybe not threaten deep as much, but he gets a lot of receiving yards as well. He's difficult to cover, so he's obviously great with throwing the disc, but he's a tough cover, and he gets the ball moving really well for them.
We touched on this earlier, but I love what he said in the press conference this morning about the importance of finding the sweet spot between field position and maintaining possession. In windy conditions like these, sometimes throwing that risky punt is going to be a little better than throwing that 10-yard lateral swing or that 5-yard gainer that pins your teammate on the sidelines.
It's almost as good as Bryce's play at the pace provided, which I know is another catchphrase that you like. But no, you're absolutely right. And Johnny's the guy you want making those decisions, right? And he also has the mindset to go back to playing at William and Mary and finish this game 50 for 63 passing. And that might be exactly what they need to win. Like we were talking before the game, will someone have double-digit throwaways in this game individually? I mean, what do you guys think? Yes or no?
Yes.
I think that DC is going to be able to figure out the wind and play pretty well in it.
Bryce?
Yeah, no, I'm taking the under on that one.
Okay.
I think we'll have some team high, but no, these are incredible throwers. They're gonna keep control of that disc.
So we talked a lot about Minnesota's throwers as well. Josh Klain, Will Brandt, there's other talents there. And I think DC's game plan is going to involve trying to frustrate those guys who want to distribute the disc, who want to dominate downfield and take those shots. The guys who are going to have those assignments are Jasper Tom and David Bloodgood. Let's start taking a look at Jasper Tom.
So yeah, Jasper, I mean, both as an individual defender, the pressure he is able to create and frustrate on a game where lateral movement will be at a premium tonight with this headwind, crosswind. I think Jasper is going to be able to be a player that can take away the primary assignment, make sure there's no free up lines, but also be so close that you feel like you're going to have to avoid some swings and take some shots that you're not ready to take. I think his impact is so good that if Minnesota gets a chance to get some of those break chances, they're going to be afraid to call a timeout to put Jasper back on the field and frustrate those handlers again. His impact on the defensive side of the disc, being able to take on a Brandt or Klain or any matchup that Boyle and the coaching staff need him to take, he's just such an impact player in that one-on-one in that small space.
If my memory doesn't fail me, he got the first block of the East Division Championship game, and then David Bloodgood followed up with 2 more blocks of his own.
Yeah, I picked Bloodgood. I think, honestly, talking about Tom and then Bloodgood is they're opposite players. Like Jasper is more of like the lockdown handler defender, and then Bloodgood's the smart. He's going to pick his times to go make the play. It's like everyone that knows DC knows that he's one of their best handler defenders. But if you're just watching, you might not see it because he's just sitting in spaces. He's kind of containing a strong handler, but then if he's getting 2 blocks a game, you know DC's feeling confident.
And then you also know that he's going to drive the counterattack, right? You've been on the field when your offense has turned it over, and you've got him going every other or making the right decision. I mean, what is that like?
It's frustrating. Well, I mean, we're so in, like, we can't let AJ Merriman huck it immediately, so we usually overplay him and just, like, not let him get it, and then you get someone like Bloodgood, who's really good with the disc, really good at moving it, just going every other down the field.
This is a talented group that Minnesota is going to have to battle against, both sides of the disc. I think DC's offensive efficiency, second in the league. DC's D-line conversion rate, top 6 in the league as well. When we come back, we're going to start looking at our keys to the game and making our picks for the first semifinal between DC and Carolina. I beg your pardon, DC and Minnesota.
You're getting ahead of yourself, Ian.
Wow. I know. I'm not. Hey,
is that your pick?
We know who the toner's picking.
There were no picks revealed there whatsoever.
Yes, there were.
Yeah, definitely were.
Game Day Live, brought to you by Power Up Trail Mix, continues right here on WatchUFA.tv and WatchUFA's YouTube.
Hello, Premium Trail Mix. Power Up is a snack that is uncomplicated and uncompromising. Every ingredient is thoughtfully sourced and carefully crafted for a mix that elevates your snacking experience. There's no better way to power up your day.
My first few years of college, I threw every single day. Of course you want to be a champion. Of course you want to be working towards winning titles.
Be happy, but never satisfied.
Better than ever.
"20 minutes away from DC and Minnesota here at 2024 Championship Weekend in Zions Bank Stadium. Gentlemen, time to start making our looks at keys to the game and picks. James, let's start with your keys for this first matchup here.
My key is going to be this DC O-line. Can they get the disc back if they turn it?
Okay.
They've got one of the highest efficiencies in league history, so they're not used to turning the disc that much. So big key is, can they get the disc back if they turn it?
And Minnesota.
Can you slow down this DC offense?
This is a group that's performing historically well and just doesn't run anything through one person. They have so many different facets through which they can distribute and attack you.
Yeah, so it's really going to be, can Minnesota play 7-on-7, play as a team? They're not going to, you can't just stop one person because it's a whole team. So can they play 7-on-7 together? And if they can, that'll be their key to get control of the game early.
Kins, what do you got?
Yeah, my keys also just look at Minnesota. I just wonder if they're going to be able to stop the DC O-line, and when they get their opportunities, if they're going to be able to punch them in. And I think that's going to be the big difference in today's game.
Bryce?
You know, when I look at Minnesota, I think, can they maintain their vertical attack? You know, if they are able to find the lanes, get some good movement, and create over-the-top opportunities for their athletes, they have them in spades, and that's going to keep them in the game. The question is, can they find those opportunities, and can they sustain that for 4 quarters?
I think it's time to get you guys on the record with your actual picks so that we can point out who was wrong or spot on as soon as these matchups wrap up. Evan, you want to kick us off with your picks for this first semifinal?
I was ready to go last, but sure, I can get it started. Yeah, I think DC is a heavy favorite, I think they will be in the finals tomorrow. I think it'll be a low-scoring game. When I gave my pick, I didn't realize it was going to be this level of wind, so I think my initial pick was 19-14 Breeze. Let me lower it to 16-11 DC. DC by 5.
Still a large margin there.
Yeah, I think DC wins by 5.
Okay.
I set the line at 4.5, and I think DC covers.
Bryce?
Mine is not too far off. I think Minnesota is going to be able to keep this competitive, but I think the consistent pressure from DC is going to put them on top. I think I call it 18-14 in DC's favor.
Kins?
Yeah, mine was somewhere around there. I think I was in
Which time? You made like 6 picks in the last 3 days.
Well, I like to wait till I see the conditions like you, Evan. I mean, you're just changing yours last second. I don't know if we can even count that.
We got 18-15 up on the screen.
I'm going with 18-15. That was the final submitted one, and yeah, I feel pretty good about that.
Yeah, I also taken DC, 21-18. I don't know if we're going to see that many points, feeling what this wind is like now. But give me DC by 3.
Over under 40.5 turnovers in this game.
Yes.
Yes.
That sounds about right. I think we're, especially in the first quarter, we're going to get the bulk of those out of the way. Teams will figure it out and clean it up, but I think you're going to have a back-and-forth affair.
Evan?
Yeah, I'd take the over on that. I think it's going to be a sloppy game. I think we're going to see a lot of sideline roller, pull double teams, trying to force guys to throw hammers. The officiating could be interesting, too. Do they let a guy pivot into a double team and get a foul call, or do they let the defenders kind of stand their ground and let that contact be a little bit more of a physical game? That's going to be an interesting thing to watch for early.
Atkins, Colorado was a team that played a number of interdivision games this year, but didn't have a lot of experience playing against the double team. There's no doubt DC has prepared for that in some extent, but what's it like facing that for the first time in person?
Yeah, it was daunting. I mean, going on that Central Division road trip and catching a double team at most points, and if not, you're probably looking at like a handful of double teams most points. Especially in the wind, it could get pretty difficult. But I think where I differ with everyone is that I really think DC and their throwers are going to be able to figure out this wind and actually make the ultimate look a little crisper than we may be alluding to.
Well, under 15 minutes away from opening pull here at Zions Bank Stadium. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been Game Day Live, brought to you by Power Up. Don't forget to tune in to the opening pull, the semifinal. Evan Lepler, I'll be with him, up with Brian Jones up in the booth, and we will have all the action for DC and Minnesota. We'll be coming back down here to the halftime show set as we can, and we'll be checking in post-game as well with as many players as we can hear from. Thank you so much for joining us here on WatchUFA.tv and WatchUFA's YouTube. For now, head over to WatchUFA.tv. Opening pull of Championship Weekend 2024 coming your way in under 15 minutes.